Over the last couple of weeks I've ranked the lightsaber stances and planets in Jedi Survivor, so today I'll be ranking the main story bosses within the game. Now that does mean that I won't be including the ones like Zeke and others that are not particularly big characters or hugely important fights towards the story, which means that there are a total of 8 major story boss fights, and I'm actually going to go from best to worst this time, so make sure you stick around until the end of the video and subscribe for more Jedi Survivor content and comment your ranking below. So for me personally, the best boss fight in Star Wars Jedi Survivor was the Seer fight against Darth Vader. First of all, even without that fight, it was just really cool to play as someone else other than Cal. Now as much as I do like playing as Cal, being able to experience the story as someone else with different moves and abilities was just really cool to do. And then the actual fight against Vader was just epic. Seeing Vader again was obviously just really cool, but actually being able to properly fight him instead of just running away from him was really fun to experience. And obviously Seer had a bit of a rivalry with Vader that began from Jedi Fallen Order, so it was really cool to see that unfold, and obviously very sad to see Seer die. My second favourite fight in Jedi Survivor was the fight against Ravis on the Shattered Moon. I personally found the fight very challenging, and I really felt like I had to work and really learn his abilities, and I found that a really satisfying experience after I beat him. Now given that I was on Jedi Knight mode, I didn't have to fight many of the bosses too much, but especially with this Ravis fight I found that I really struggled the first time, but then after the third time I felt like I really learned his abilities, I changed my stances around, and then I beat him with ease. Not only was the fight a really satisfying experience, but Ravis himself was a really great character in this game, and I just loved his personality and his desire for an honourable death. Now the third place fight is actually tied between the second Bode fight and the first Dagan fight. The bond that Bode and Cal had by the end of the game was obviously pretty strong, so Bode turning on him was obviously a really sad thing to see, and it was even more heartbreaking to actually have to kill him at the end. Bode this second time around was actually also really challenging like Ravis, and there was also just tons on the line and tension and great story, so it's definitely up there with one of the best. As for the fight against Dagan, it was just super cool to learn more and see more about the High Republic in a photorealistic setting, and see him bleeding a lightsaber crystal was just awesome to watch, as that's not something we've actually seen happen before. I believe we have seen it in comics, but it's obviously not the same as seeing it in a video game. And obviously we just found out that he was a Jedi as well, so having to go from that to then fighting him was obviously just a huge moment and very mysterious as well, as we didn't actually really know much about him. In the 5th place spot for my favourite Jedi Survivor fights is then the Dagan fight, towards the end of the game where you end up killing him. The fight itself was good and I really enjoyed having Bode there to assist me, but it was actually more the story element which puts it higher up on the list, because I really enjoyed seeing how Dagan was able to manipulate the Force to create a second arm, and also just messing with Cal and Bode. Cal also obviously got really injured and looked like he was about to die, so that was a pretty huge moment, but ultimately Cal won, which is obviously inevitable. But regardless, there was a lot of emotion and suspense within that fight, and obviously this whole game so far had essentially been about Dagan, so it was really interesting to see that come to an end and then the next big phase start. 6th on the list is the fight against the 9th sister. Now this was awesome to me, as I had a feeling she would return anyway, and obviously we had that confirmation via one of the trailers a few months before the game came out. So it was really cool to see a theory that I've had for a few years now actually come to fruition. And obviously with there being a 5-year time jump, meant that especially for the 9th sister herself, there was probably a lot of emotion on the line, as last time they met, Cal obviously had cut her hand off. Another really cool thing about this fight was the fact that Cal had clearly done his research on the 9th sister and was talking to her about that and really getting her frustrated, which then led to her being brutally killed by Cal. 7th on the list is the first boss fight against Bode. The fight itself isn't particularly long and obviously you're forced to lose, so for that reason that's why it's so low down, but in terms of the story and the emotional impact that this had, it definitely is towards the top. Obviously before we had this fight we literally just lost Eno Cordova, even though he just returned earlier in the game, so that was very sad, and there was a great speeder bike chase that happened before. And then just before the fight breaks out we then find out that Bode was actually a Jedi in the Clone Wars. So overall it was just a huge thing to have in the game, but as a boss fight it wasn't the best in my opinion. Now at the very bottom of this list is the second fight against Dagan on the Lucrehulk. The fight itself was fun and I don't have anything against that, but I don't feel like it had a huge amount of emotional weight or challenge to it like the Ravis fight did, for example. So as a result of that, that is why it is down at the bottom. But that being said, the cutscenes at the beginning and end had some amazing action throughout, which was just really enjoyable to watch. so I was definitely a big fan of that. Now I think it's worth saying that no boss fight in this game has been bad whatsoever. I've really enjoyed all of them, and the story for this game was just absolutely fantastic. And of course I do have to give an honourable mention to Rick the door technician, who despite being one of the easiest boss fights in gaming history, lives in many people's minds rent-free. And canonically speaking, if he was able to stop Cal, that could have had major implications on the Star Wars story. So guys, that is my official ranking of the major story bosses in Jedi Survivor. As a game, there are just far too many bosses to actually be able to count all of them, and I do have a video sort of touching upon this next week, so do stick around to the channel for that. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and make sure you comment what your ranking is in the comments below. Thank you all very much for watching, and may the Force be with you always.